Well. Hi there, Internet. This is Justin, aka Demonic Sweaters. And why didn't I make myself a fresh cup of coffee before I got on here? And where is my camera? There we go. Okay. Hey, everybody. How's it going? This is Justin, aka Demonic Sweaters. I already said that. This is the Demonic Sweaters podcast, aka live AMA stream on YouTube. And another unexpected stream. Well, I expected, but I didn't really announce it to anybody. But this tends to be the way I'm doing things now. So I don't know. If you guys are around, you can check it out when I'm streaming live. Or if you're not around, you can always listen to it later if you want. And so, hey, how's it going? I actually wrote down a little guide this time to talk about. And it's not only for this time. Actually, can you hear me okay? Let me make sure my mic is up loud enough. Turn this up just a little bit. Yeah, I think that's better. Okay, so not just for this particular episode, but I actually wrote kind of an outline that I can use for all of the upcoming episodes. And hey, Lima Farofa, how's it going? That was one of my songs, actually. That was a song called T-Ghosts, and that was off my album G Stomper Tunes, which is actually an album that I created all on Android with the app called G Stomper. I did that years ago, actually, when G Stomper first came out. But I'll post a link. It's actually at anthillrecordings.bandcamp.com if you want to check it out. So yeah, that song was called T-Ghosts, and I'll be playing some more off of that G Stomper Tunes album this episode. But what I was saying was... So what I'm going to start doing now, after the last episode where I was like, didn't really know what I was doing at all, I decided to create kind of a workflow for all of these podcasts. And just so that way I have, like, at least if I don't have a guest, I have at least some kind of idea as to what I'm doing. So anyway, what it's going to be is I'm going to have some Linux news and then some personal projects, talk about some of that stuff if I have it. Some general music, tech news, if it's applicable, as well as songs throughout the episode. And then poll results, if those are applicable, which today I do have a poll result for you guys. Excuse me. And that poll, if you saw it, if you haven't seen it yet and you still want to go check it out, look on the community page on the Demonic Sweaters YouTube, and you'll see the poll where you can vote. And my question was, I only own one LaserDisc, only one, and there was a multiple choice question of which one you think it may be. So if you want to go there and vote, I need to look again and see where it was. Last time I checked, I think Better Off Dead was in the lead, but I'm going to reveal which LaserDisc I actually do own a little bit later in the show. And aside from that, I'm going to be talking about some drum stuff, as well as I'm going to give a recommendation for an album that I like. I'm going to give you some paranormal news and some movie entertainment stuff, which I usually do pretty much all this stuff every episode anyway, but I just went and wrote it down, and I figure if I have an actual flow to it, it might work a little bit better. Always trying to improve for you guys. And so, anyway, Linux news. Let's get right to it with that, because that's what I've been reading about a lot. And one of the things that I've been reading about in the past few days is you've probably seen this too. A lot of news sources have been pushing this story that supposedly all new Chromebooks will be able to run Linux out of the box. And they've said this in the past, which turned out not to be true. You can make a Chromebook run Linux, or you could, but it is not out of the box, and it's not really easy, and it doesn't really run that well, honestly. It runs okay, but it's not great. But with this news, at first, when I first started reading those headlines, I was like, oh, wow, that's awesome. Like you could just plop in a Linux distro and boot it up and run Linux on a Chromebook, and that'll finally make these seemingly worthless computers worth something. But no, again, that's not what it really is. This story has been circulating around, but it really isn't running Linux on Chromebooks. There's something called, where is it? I have it here somewhere. Did I close the page? It's called like Crutini. I think that's it. Crutini. And what it is, it's almost like if you ever did try experimenting with Linux on a Chromebook before, there was this Crouton Linux that you could run that basically was allowed you to kind of tab between a Linux installation with the Chrome installation, and it wasn't really running as the main OS. It was kind of running nested within Chrome, which is weird because if you've never used Chrome OS is Linux. I mean, it's a type of Linux essentially. That might be it. Crostini, something like that. I did accidentally close the page, but again, what it is it's basically another virtualization form of Linux. Although it is easier than Crouton was. Like I guess what it is, it's built into Chrome now, so you could essentially install Linux programs through the command line and things like that, but they are still running in sort of a virtualized environment as far as I can tell. I haven't actually experimented with it yet personally or actually tried it, but everything I've read makes it sound like that this is actually the case. It's not like you can like just download Ubuntu, put the USB drive in the Chromebook, boot it up, and install Linux on the Chromebook, which is what they should do. I mean, so many more people would buy these things if you could just install a regular operating system on it. I mean, Chrome OS I'm not knocking it too much. Like, it is nice for what it is, but what it is not much. It's like, even since the early days, when it was just a browser, at least it has like a file manager in it now and stuff and some other things. But it's still not Linux, even though it is Linux, but it's not real Linux. Like you can't, install Reaper on it or like, Ardor or Rose Garden or any of these cool things that you can do in Linux. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I mean, it's almost like how Windows 10 now has where you can download Linux versions through the Windows Store and run them like through the command line, which is pretty cool if you're using command line tools. And the same goes for this new Chrome OS feature, I would assume. I'm thinking that's sort of what it's going to be like, which is cool. I mean, I'm not totally knocking it. I do think it's cool, but it would be much, much cooler if you could just easily install Linux on them. That's all I'm saying. I don't see why they don't do it. It's weird, but I don't know. I guess that's just kind of what Google, what they do. They're trying to have their own thing, which is cool. I mean, I did check it out. It was in Best Buy, and I didn't check out the Linux thing, but I checked out the latest version of Chrome OS in Best Buy yesterday. I was there, and they had some Chromebooks, and I was playing around with it, and the UI is really nice. I mean, visually, it's great. It's really cool looking. It used to kind of look like Mac OS a little bit, but now it really looks unique. Like, it doesn't look like Windows or Mac. I think it really, really looks cool. And if they just expanded upon its Linux features, like if you could just sudo apt-get install Rose Garden, if they had their own repositories and things like that where you could, well, maybe they do. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think they do from what I was reading. It doesn't sound like it. But anyway, I thought I would bring that up. Another one is Arch Linux just became available in the Windows 10 store. So speaking of that, I forget what they call it in Windows 10, but their Linux virtualization system that they have, which is pretty nice. I use it in Windows 10 when I'm logged in there from time to time. If you want to do something on the command line, it's nice to have a Linux command line. I just use Debian. But I've never actually used Arch Linux, so I don't really know what its advantages are. But I hear good things. A lot of people, seem to use it, and it has a lot of forums out there. Like anytime I'm searching something for Linux, it seems like I always find something in the Arch Linux forums. Like people are really active, and the support community is really good for Arch Linux. So that's pretty cool. So anyway, if anybody has any questions, as usual, you may ask away. I'll do my best to answer. Been trying to think of some new tutorials and videos that I'm going to be making. The next one I'm working on, or I started thinking about it and kind of writing it in my head a little bit, is an external MIDI workshop or like almost like a full-on MIDI 101 in a way, because I know there's a lot of people out there that don't really, I mean, a lot of you guys I'm sure know about MIDI already, but there's a lot of people that don't even know what it really is still, you know. So I want to kind of walk through like the very basics, as well as show kind of like a full-blown MIDI production environment, and not just, and when I say MIDI, I'm not talking about just software synths on the computer. I mean like MIDI hardware, hooking it up, sequencing through hardware and computers and all of that stuff. So that's something I have in the works right now. Hopefully it'll, oh, what happened? Just accidentally switched my window. Hopefully it'll be up here in the next couple of days, maybe tomorrow, but we'll see. So, latest personal projects, that is what I just talked about. So, let's go ahead and play another song, and I'm going to get back to, well, okay, so I won't keep you in suspense too much longer. I'm going to look, while I'm playing this song, I'm going to check out what the poll results are right now for what you guys think the only LaserDisc that I own may be, and then after I get back from the song, I'm going to tell you guys what that is and show it to you. So let's see, what are we going to play? Something off of G Stomper Tunes again, and let's go ahead and play. This one is called Kent Thruster, and the reason why this is called Kent Thruster, K-E-N-T, if you just Google that, Kent Thruster, you'll see what it is. It's a really, really cheap fixed gear bicycle that you used to be able to buy from Walmart. Well, you may still be able to buy it. And they were $99, brand new. And when I first moved to New York City, I bought one of these and had it delivered to my office and used it for my daily commuter to work and back for about 2 years. And that thing was actually a really, really good bike for $99. I put some new tires on it, of course, because the ones that it came with were pretty crappy. I think they only had like a 35-pound PSI max that you could fill them up to. So it definitely needed some new tires. But once I did that, I rode the heck out of that thing. I used to ride it back and forth to work every single day, which was about 7 miles each way, I think. And then would ride it to band practice 3 nights a week, which was an extra 7 or 8 miles. And then on weekends, I would cruise around, you know, back and forth from Brooklyn to Manhattan to Queens. And I was riding like crazy from 2012 until 2014 or 15. I mean, I still ride a lot, but not like I was then. I was riding like seriously like a madman, like just all over the place. But anyway, that's what this song is named after, Kent Thruster. So I'm going to go ahead and play it right now. Here we go. All right. Sorry for the extreme cut off there. It looked like my player was frozen, but it wasn't. So when I pressed the button, it just stopped. But that tends to happen to me a lot on here. But anyway, sorry about that, guys. But okay, so I went and I looked at the poll. Oh, let me get my camera back. There we go. I went and I looked at the poll, and it looks like that for my... I only own a single LaserDisc. Can you guess which one it is? The options here were Weekend at Bernie's, Better Off Dead, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and Time Cop. 29 of you voted, and it looks like amazingly, well, not amazingly, it's a good guess. The majority of you guessed Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, which is a good guess, but unfortunately that is not correct. So Weekend at Bernie's was second place, and that was 28% of you voted for Weekend at Bernie's. And as much as I would love to have that movie on LaserDisc, I do not. And let's see. So 24% of you voted for the movie Time Cop. And of course, Time Cop is the classic action film starring none other than Jean-Claude Van Damme as a time-traveling cop. And if you voted Time Cop on LaserDisc, that indeed is the LaserDisc that I own. And if you can check it out right here, or if you want to check it out, this thing is pretty darn sweet. Let's just pull this out here. You know, and if any of you had looked at my Instagram, you would have known, because I actually posted a selfie of myself reflected in the Time Cop LaserDisc. But this LaserDisc was actually given to me by my friend Scott Blair from West Virginia. And I don't actually even own a LaserDisc player. I'd love to have one, but I don't. But he sent me this because back when we were like crazy 20-somethings, we were like smoking weed one night, and I just randomly said Time Cop for no reason. And for some reason, we just thought that was the most hilarious thing in the world. And so like a couple of years ago, he just randomly sent me this Time Cop LaserDisc. And I thought that was hilarious too. So yeah, so Time Cop is the LaserDisc that I own. And that was the result of this week's poll. And thanks for voting on that. And the last option on there was Better Off Dead. And Better Off Dead actually is genuinely one of my favorite movies. If you've never seen that movie, starring John Cusack, it's definitely one of the funniest movies ever made. It's just great. I love it. And I would love to have that on LaserDisc too. And I'd love to have a LaserDisc player, so I should probably buy one at some point. They're becoming more and more expensive. But I have this Time Cop LaserDisc, so I'm going to have to get something eventually to play it on. Anyway, yep, Time Cop. Let's see, what is next on the list here? Okay, so one of the things actually that I wanted to talk about next, and next on the list here, is some drum-related news, drum sets. And the one company that I wanted to talk about today is Ludwig Drums. Now, Ludwig's, if you don't know, are one of the oldest drum set makers, drum companies on the planet. They've been making drums since the early 1900s, or maybe even 1800s, I'm not sure. But a really, really long time they've been making drum sets. And when drum sets were actually still called trap sets is how long Ludwig has been making these things. And the reason why they were called trap sets back then, if you don't know this, is because back when, first off, drums have been around for a really long time, like thousands of years, obviously, or hundreds of thousands of years. And, you know, they come from Africa originally or other indigenous cultures. But the drum set really hasn't been around that long. And when they first started putting drum sets together, they used to call them contraptions. And that's how the name trap set came about, was because people used to sit behind this contraption of all these, you know, they would have like a bass drum and they'd have like triangles dangling and cymbals and stuff like that, all like they didn't really know what they were doing in the early days. They would just like piece all this stuff together. They used to use something called a Chinese tom that was like a small rack tom with an animal skin on the top and another skin that was riveted on the bottom, or both were riveted on sometimes. But anyway, that's just some general trivia there. But the reason why I wanted to talk about Ludwig's is, well, I've always loved Ludwig drums. They have been some of my favorite drum manufacturers, even though now I play a Tama. But I've had several Ludwigs, and I've loved all of them. And hey, Ritual, thanks, man. Good to see you too. And thanks, Lima Farofa, about the Time Cop comment. Yeah, it's a great movie. But yeah, so Ludwig recently came out with this this new type of drum set called the Neosonic. What is it? Let me look at it. New Sonic is what it's called, but it's spelled Neu, like the band New. New Sonic. And what these are, they're really, really cool looking drums. They're kind of like made in these flat finishes. Just go to Ludwig's website and check it out. It's just ludwig-drums.com. And I'll post a link in the chat. But they're very cool. Like, they're kind of an in-between, like, because Ludwig's now, like, since the high-end Ludwigs are still made in the United States, like, basically any drum set that's made in the U.S. costs a ridiculous amount of money, or it's kind of like that with anything. Like, any piece of equipment that's made in the U.S. costs a ridiculous amount of money. So Ludwig came out with this new Sonic type of drum set that is still, I believe they're still made in the U.S. I could be wrong about that. I should have double-checked that. But I think they are, from what I've been reading. But they're not as expensive as their Keystones, their Club Dates, or their Classic Maples, which are kind of and the Legacy Maples are their kind of highest-end sets. And it looks like they have this new set on here, too, called the Legacy Mahogany Diamond Flash Inlay. That thing's pretty weird. But they have some beautiful drums. Ludwig, their drums always look just classy, and they still have a very classic look to them. And the new Sonic looks really nice. I love the flat satin finishes they're doing in them. Ritual 301 says, I still call them trap sets. Didn't know about the contraption bit. Always thought it was because of the look of the player being trapped behind the set. And yeah, that could be partly it too. It could be a double meaning, but you know, of course I wasn't around back then, but that's always what I've heard though. It's just the contraption thing is where that name came from. But yeah, so these new Sonics are very nice. And if I had space, see, the problem is right now, you guys have seen, if you've watched my channel, you've seen my drum room is like so tiny. I have no room for any other set at all. Like, all I have is my Tama Bop, which is an 18-inch bass drum, 12-inch rack tom, 14-inch floor tom, and then the Tama Techstar electronic drums, you know, the two toms, or two pads that I have in there. Nothing else will fit, period. There's just no way. I even had a second bass drum for that kid. I got a second, or my sister got it for me, an 18 by 20-inch kick drum to use when I wanted to gig out and stuff with a bigger bass drum. And I had it in storage for a while, but I ended up getting rid of the storage unit because I'm kind of self-employed with all this stuff now, and I really couldn't afford it anymore. So unfortunately, I had to sell the 18 by 20-inch bass drum, just not because I really needed the money, but I just have nowhere to put it at all. Like, in fact, it's sitting in a box right here, and it's being picked up by FedEx tomorrow because I already sold it. But what I was saying is the Ludwigs, if I could afford one and had the space, I would definitely pick up one of these new Sonics. I just think they're really, really cool looking, especially that baby blue. Like, that thing is just beautiful looking. It's just such a nice looking set. And I love how they went back to the white logo head with the old writing on there. It just looks so nice. But back, just to go down their line here, Ludwig, too, is one of the only companies right now that makes a high-quality children's set. And they have a couple different options. You know, there's the Breakbeats, which really is, well, it's not really a children's set. It could be, though. It's kind of like a super compact. It's even more compact than the Tama Bop that I play, but it's so small that breakbeats could absolutely be played by a child. It's got a 16-inch bass drum on it, and I think it's a 10-inch tom and a 13-inch floor tom, I think, and a 13-inch snare. And then they even have their Ludwig Pocket set, which is even smaller than that. It's or it might be the same sizes, but it doesn't have a riser on the bass drum. So that one's really tiny, and both of those are great quality sets for kids. And because like there's a lot of like kids drum sets. I did a blog post on this a while back. Well, I was researching the kids sets too, because parents will ask me, like what type of drum set they should buy their kid, and some of them are very young. Like if the child's like 5, or 6, anywhere up to like 8 years old, really. Some of them, just can't reach the pedals on adult-sized drums. Like they're just too big. And, some of these kids I know could play much better if they had a set that was, their size. So, and it's really, really cool that Ludwig sells, especially that pocket set. I think it's only like $249, and like it has everything in it. It has like, a cymbal, hi-hats, like working hi-hats, bass drum, a throne, and it's all like compact. And I've seen like adults play these things too. Like you could modify, like if you grew up playing this set, you could totally upgrade it and put a riser on the kick drum and just keep using it. Like it would work. They're really well made. They're just good stuff. But if you go down and look at those on their site, you can see all those different. They have the pocket kit, the break beats, but there's also this set on here called the Accent. And well, I missed talking about the Ludwig Junior, which is another kid size set as well. Although I would go with the pocket kit before the Junior, but the Junior is pretty cool too. But the pocket, that's like just such a cool looking set, and it's tiny. But the reason why though I wanted to talk about the Accent, that's like kind of their most entry level set that they offer. And I actually had one of these at one point. I had the Accent Combo, which they don't really make anymore. Like I think the Accents went through like several different manufacturers in China. And I had one of the older ones. And I actually got it kind of on accident. Or not on accident. I got it like through a really, really bad deal and really sketchy dude who was working at Sam Ash in Clearwater, Florida. And I think it's a pretty funny story, so I wanted to talk about that, and that's why I want to talk about the Accents, because like what had happened is I had this Gretsch. It was a Gretsch what was it called? Catalina Birch. And it was a really nice set. Very nice. And I had it for a few years, but I had several sets at the time, or not several, I think I had like 2 or 3. I had a Ludwig Classic, and then I had the Gretsch. And so I wasn't really using the Gretsch that much. And so I was in Sam Ash one day in Clearwater, and I saw this really cool old Ludwig Octoplus Vistalite. Now, if you're not familiar with what an Octoplus is, just Google that right now. This set was like this crazy clear, or sometimes multicolored Ludwig Vistalite with 2 bass drums and all these toms. Like I think they started at like 8-inch toms and went all the way to like 20-inch or 18-inch toms. And this was like, I would say it was about 60% of the Octoplus, or it might have been a Quadruplus actually, because they did make Quadruplus too, which was less pieces. So that's probably what it was. So it was there, and I saw it sitting there for several weeks, and it was kind of in a pile. It wasn't really set up. It looked like they didn't really know what to do with it. And so I was asking this guy, who was working there, and it was missing a lot of parts. It didn't have any mounting hardware, and there were rims missing and lugs and all kinds of stuff. And so I was like, hey man, tell me a little bit about this Octoplus or Quadruplus, whatever it was. And he was like, yeah, we need to fix it up, and but we're going to sell it. And I was like, well, I have this Gretsch, I could trade you for the Gretsch. The Gretsch is in brand new condition, but the only way that I'd trade it is if you got me all the hardware, for the toms, and the lugs and all that stuff that it's missing, because I don't want to have to spend a lot of money to try to fix this thing back up. And the guy was like, let me think about it. Bring over the Gretsch and I'll take a look at it. So I was like, all right. So the next day I went back there with the Gretsch and showed it to the dude. And he was like, oh yeah, these are great. Like I could totally do that. So let's go ahead. And so I was like, cool, so I brought in the Gretsch and he started like taking out the drums and everything. And then, and part of the deal too is I wanted all new heads. And so he was like, all right, yeah, just wait here for a minute. Like when I was in the parking lot. And then like, so I was waiting out there and then like, I didn't see him for a while. And like, I was like, what is this guy doing in there? I figured he got stuck with a customer or something. And so I go back inside and the guy is like, he's like, oh yeah, here's some of the heads, but he's like, there was like this back door, like, like from the side of Sam Ash. And he was like, meet me over at the door and I'll give you the heads. And I was like, that doesn't sound legitimate at all, man. And he was like, no, it's cool. And I was like, all right. So I go over there and he takes the heads over there. And like, I was still complaining the whole time. I was like, man, if I knew this was going to be sketchy, I probably wouldn't have wanted to do this deal. And he's like, no, it's totally cool. Like, don't worry about it. And then I was like, well, what about all the hardware and everything? He's like, well, we have to order that through Ludwig, and it'll be a little while before they can get it here. And it's like, oh, man, really? And then I was like, okay. So we go in, and, like, we're looking at the catalog and stuff. And he seemed like he was really doing it. Like, he was, like, writing down all the part numbers and everything that we needed. And, like, believe it or not, Ludwig still manufactures all the replacement parts for, like, their kits dating back, like, 40 or 50 years. Like, it's crazy. Like, you can order like anything from Ludwig. So he was writing down all these part numbers and all this stuff, and like he was like, yeah, I'll put in the order, and like they should be here in a couple of days. And so I went home and I took the Quadra-Plus with me and took it home. And like part of the problem though, I started to realize once I got it home, is some of the shells were cracked. And this can be, well, it can be either not a big deal or it can be a very big deal, depending on the crack and depending on which drum it is for the Vistalites. Now, the older Vistalites were made out of a slightly different material than the newer Vistalites. The newer Vistalites were, I think they were acrylic or something. I can't remember. I'd have to look it up. But the thing is with the old ones is they are very hard to repair, notoriously hard to repair, to glue or anything like that. And the bass drum had a crack in it. But it didn't seem to matter too much on the bass drum because the head sort of held it together. And I had other Vistalites in the past that had cracks. So I wasn't like super worried about it because I knew like as long as it wasn't too bad, they'd usually hold up. So the bass drum was okay. But a couple of the toms, since they were the Octoplus or the Quadra-Plus toms, they were concert toms. And that means that they don't have any bottom lugs or bottom hardware on there. And so like, some of the cracks on there were actually starting to look pretty bad when, at closer examination. And I was like, man, I'm not feeling so great about this trade anymore. And like, but then I was like, well, once the guy gets all the parts and I put it all together and everything, then maybe it'll be fine. And so like a few days went by, 3 or 4 days went by, and I didn't hear from him. And I was starting to feel like, like, what the fuck, So like, I called him up and he's like, oh, no, they're still on order. Call me back in a week. They should be here. And so I waited a week. I called him back and he wasn't there. And then like, I was like, great, and then so like a few more days went by and kept calling him and he wasn't there. He was saying he wasn't there, so finally I just went there and I just showed up and he was there. So like he was avoiding my calls and I was like, hey man, I don't think I want to do this anymore. Like, I just want to get back my Gretsch. I have the Quadra-Plus in my car. You can take it back. And he was like, yeah, well, I already ordered those parts and all this stuff. And I was like, no, man, like, nothing's coming in. It's been weeks now. You need to show me some kind of work order or something. And then, like, finally he was like, well, I actually sold the Gretsch already. And I was like, It's like, you got to be kidding me, man. Like, I was like really pissed off. Like, this guy had like not. Well, first off, he was like sneaking out drum heads, basically stealing drum heads and giving them to me. And then he lied about ordering the parts from Ludwig. And I can't remember the guy's name, or I would just tell you here on the podcast to make sure never to buy anything from this dude. But this was years ago. But so, like, I was like, well, I'm not leaving here without another drum kit to replace that Gretsch. And the only set that he had in there that, you know, the store management was willing to part with was the Ludwig Accent, which was like a huge downgrade from the Gretsch Catalina Birch that I had. But it wasn't bad. I was like, at least it was something that worked, you know, so I was pissed. But there was really little I could do at this point. I was like, all right, well, give me the Ludwig Accent, and I want all new heads for it too, like brand new heads, top and bottom. And so he agreed to that. So I got all new heads, and I got the Accent, and it was a 5-piece Accent with a 20-inch bass drum. It was silver. It had a 10, a 12, and a 14-inch rack tom. So it was all sizes that I like. I usually like smaller drums like that. And so, like, you know, I was really mad, but I took it home, and I set it up, and I put all the heads on it, and much to my surprise, that thing sounded amazing. I was so impressed with the sound of that drum set, and it sounded better than the Gretsch, honestly. Like, I was really, really impressed. And at the time I was playing with this, there was like this R&B cover group, and I took it out to a gig in Tampa with this R&B cover group, and even like the keyboard player, when I started playing it, he was like, you know, he commented about the kick drum. He was like, damn, that thing sounds amazing. And I was like, yeah, I know, it's crazy. It's like, it's like a $600 drum set, you know, that's like brand new. Like, it's like not expensive at all, or $400. I think it was, the older ones were cheaper than they are now. So yeah, and I ended up playing that thing for quite a while, and recorded with it a lot. But unfortunately, Tampa is very hot. And one day I left it in the back of my car, my black Toyota Corolla that I had at the time. And the wraps on that thing just got completely warped by the sun, because I just left it in my car for too long in the hot sun. And unfortunately, they were very warped. And so I had to peel them all off. And then I painted the whole drum set silver to kind of match how it used to look. But it never looked quite as nice as it did. And then I think I eventually sold it to a friend. I forget what I did with it. But it still sounded great, even when I stripped off all the wraps and painted it. And what was weird is when I stripped off all the wraps, it looked like, I don't know how they did these shells, but they almost looked like they were made from like recycled shells from other drums in a way, because like they all had, like, after I ripped off the wraps, they all had remnants of like lacquer paint on the outside of different colors. Like, some of them were like bluish, some of them had some red on them, and like, so it looked like whoever was making Ludwig outsourced their drums to in China at the time was taking shells, maybe factory seconds from another drum company, and re-wrapping them, and putting new hardware on them and stuff, Ludwig hardware, and selling them. And so I don't know what the shells were. There's no way to really know, but they sounded amazing. And the bass drum especially sounded really cool. And I always, I kind of regretted getting rid of that set because I liked how much it sounded. And the snare drum, too. I had a 6.5 by 14-inch wood snare drum that was silver, matched all of it. And they all had the Ludwig, like the Mini Classic lugs. So they looked really cool, and they sounded great. And I ended up getting that set, like I said, out of like really poor circumstances, but ended up really liking it. So Ludwig Accents, I don't know how they are now. I haven't played one of the newer ones, but they look pretty much the same, but I don't think they have the size. Actually, let me click on the link. I'm not sure that they still have the sizes that I had. The ones that I had were like, it was a 20-inch bass drum, I think a 14 by 20, 10 by something, 12-inch rack tom, and 14-inch floor tom. And I just really liked the sizes. They were like kind of like, smaller rock, or fusion size is what sometimes people call that. Bigger than the set that I have now. Well, the toms were the same as the set that I have now, but the bass drum was a little bit bigger. Like, I really love a 14 by 20 inch bass drum. It's like one of my favorite sizes. But now that I've been playing an 18 for a few years, I'm actually really starting to like the 18 too. Like, I've gotten that thing. I learned how to tune it really well. And I was listening back to some of my new recordings on the album that's coming out at the end of this month, called In Depth. And some of the bass drum sounds I got on that, like that little 18-inch bass drum sounds huge. Like, it sounds bigger than some drum sounds that I've recorded with 22-inch bass drums. But anyway, so that's the story of Ludwig Accents. And that was pretty long. So let me go ahead and play another song. And we'll get back to some other stuff once I get back. So where is my songs here? What am I going to play? I'm going to play this one. It's called Barrier, No Barrier, also off of the G Stomper Tunes album. So here we go. Barrier, No Barrier. All right, so that was called Barrier No Barrier off of the album Tracker, or no, sorry, not Tracker Adjust. What is that album called? G Stomper Tunes, that's what it's called. And that was the album, in case you missed the beginning, that I made 100% in the app called G Stomper for Android. So that whole album was made on my Android phone at the time, which I think was a Galaxy S3, I think I had then, or something. But yeah, so check that out if you want. And yeah, let me just go back through here and read some of these comments that I missed while I was on the drum rant. Let's see. Ritual 301 says, I always really liked Ludwig's, but a bit out of my price range back when I was still playing. I would have loved a set of Ludwig's, but Tama, it always was. Nothing wrong with Tamas, especially for rock. I love Tamas. I think out of, hardware and stuff, I think they kind of blow away Ludwig's, honestly. But, the Ludwig drums have a special place in my heart, too. What's funny, though, like, speaking of some bad hardware for Ludwig's, one of the Ludwig's I had that was one of their high-end sets, I had a Ludwig Super Classic, which was like the ones that were made like with the really thick, like 7-ply maple shells, and they had the really long lugs on them that went from top to bottom, like for top and bottom heads, and they were the power toms, very deep. But I had one of those sets when I played in The Girls Named Lourdes, and talk about like, this is when they were made in North Carolina, I think, and like, just speaking about like crappy hardware, the floor tom lug, or the floor tom, what are those called? The legs, where you tighten the legs, like the wing nut on the floor tom legs was so big, and it was designed this way. It was so big that when you turned it to tighten up the floor tom legs, it actually cut into the shell of the drum. Like, it was like designed so poorly. And I'm not knocking on Ludwig, but they have been known to like, I don't think they do that kind of stuff anymore, but there was a period, especially in the 80s, where they had some notoriously shoddy workmanship with stuff like that. And this was one of those. I think it was a mid 80s or early 90s set. And it was so funny. Like, I mean, after I tightened them a few times, it just, just wore a little divot in the floor tom there, where I would like tighten the floor tom legs up. But it worked fine, but literally damaged the drum just to tighten the floor tom legs, which was kind of hilarious and messed up. But yeah, Tamas are awesome though. Nothing like that ever happens on a Tama. Their stuff has been super well made, like for as long as I can remember. Like, they've always made the most indestructible cymbal stands and hi-hat stands, bass drum pedals. The most destructible hardware, though, is not Ludwig. I think it's Pearl. Like, every single thing that I've ever had by Pearl has literally just fallen apart. Like, some of their drums sound great, but their hardware, I don't know what kind of metal they use on that stuff, but it is like, it's like cookie dough. I mean, that stuff just like breaks and falls apart. I don't know what or why, but it's just not good. I just would never recommend any hardware made by Pearl. So moving on, some of you may not agree with that. I know there's a lot of people love Pearl stuff, but I like I said, I think their drums sound good, but their hardware sucks big time. Okay, so I wanted to now give an album recommendation that I like. And this is actually one, it's not related to anything that I've done. And I can't really play it on here, but I can send you guys a link. And what this is called Interior. Let me find it. It's kind of hard to find because that's such a generic name. And this was a Japanese band that released a single record. And it was released on Yen, which was Yellow Magic Orchestra. The label that was Yellow Magic Orchestra was on. And it was also produced, and I believe he might have played on it, by Haruomi from YMO, Yellow Magic Orchestra. And, oops, accidentally played some of it. But it was released on Yen as well as Windham Hill. Windham Hill is a kind of a new age label in the US, and it was released a little bit later, but here it is. Here's the YouTube link, and you guys can check it out. And I just absolutely love this album. It's one of my favorite albums, I think, ever. It's instrumental, and it's really, really subtle. But you have to listen to the whole thing to really get it, because it's like, it's not really like Yellow Magic Orchestra, though you could tell it's from that era. It's got a much more subtle kind of sound to it, where everything's kind of soft and everything is just very interesting. There's like really interesting sounds on it, and some really interesting drum beats too, like that are very calm at the same time, which is not something you hear very often. Like, there's some patterns where like the hi-hat will be playing this kind of off looping kind of pattern that kind of like matches up. It's like overlapping time signatures. That's really subtly done. It doesn't sound like overtly, prog or mathematic, but when you really sit there and analyze what he's doing or what the whole band is doing, it's very complex. Like, it's really, really cool stuff. It's complex music that doesn't sound complex. That's why it's so interesting. It sounds actually really beautiful and kind of calm and just peaceful sounding. And it's just, I would say this is in my top 5 albums of all time. Like, I listen to this album a lot, and I definitely think everybody should check it out. So the link is there, and if you're listening to this on the podcast later, I'll put it in the podcast description as well. It's really hard to find. You can't get it on Spotify or anything like that. If you want to order it from Discogs, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. It's not easy to find. You can find it on SoulSeek, which is the file sharing platform, which is questionable legality, but for things like this, it's kind of like, if you can't buy it, so what are you supposed to do? I mean, I guess you could buy it, but not everybody can spend like, $150 on an album. So anyway, it's really great stuff. And that's one of the things that I wanted to do in all of these episodes, is just give a single recommendation for you guys to check out. And yeah, definitely check out Interior. And interestingly, it was called Interior on Yen, but it was called The Interiors when it was released in the US on Windham Hill. So slightly different. Moving on from that, back on some, this is like the most random podcast in the world, but now it's time for some UFO or slash paranormal news. And I was reading this really interesting story, and this is as of May 2nd, 2019, which is not that long ago. The U.S. Navy is planning on setting up another official reporting and investigative system that monitors and reports from its pilots about UFOs. And this is actually an official thing. This is not one of those things that somebody's just making up. They have actually stated this. However, they're not going to share what they find with the public. And they've already said that too, which is pretty crazy, but it's not surprising either. But the fact that the U.S. Navy is still looking into this, and I mean, it's not just the U.S. Navy. I mean, we found out a couple of years ago, I think it was last year, maybe, or maybe the year before, that this whole time, even Obama had some kind of a UFO investigation thing set up, a secret organization they didn't tell us about. Supposedly they weren't investigating any of this stuff since Project Blue Book, which was like stopped way back in the 1970s or 60s or whatever that was. But they have been. That's the thing, and that we keep finding out about it. They said that they don't investigate it, but they really have been. And if you really think about it, they should. I mean, even if 100% of all the UFO sightings are false, they should have something like that, because, I mean, think about it like this. We're on a planet floating out in space on a galaxy that's floating through space, and we don't know what we're going to run into. It's the same thing as like, if you had like a boat floating out in the middle of the ocean, you could float for 10 days and see nothing. And then on the 11th day, you could get eaten by a whale, I mean, it's kind of like, it almost seems insane that they wouldn't be looking for this stuff or wouldn't be investigating it, because if you really think about how little we know about what is out there, we should kind of be on guard, like all the time, actually. I mean, it was like Stephen Hawking who said a couple of years ago, too, before he died, that we really shouldn't be sending out signals into space trying to get the attention of aliens that's probably a bad idea. And I tend to agree with him there too, because like, look how it worked out for the Native Americans when they they didn't reach out, but when, the Spanish came over to, the Americas, look how that worked out for the Native Americans. Not so well, so like if, the aliens found us, there's a pretty good chance it wouldn't really work out so well unless they're already here, which of course they could be. I go back and forth on that, but sometimes I think like this could very well just be some gigantic, like ant farm, basically, just some big experiment for aliens to monitor and, just mess with us and just see what we do in situations and stuff. Because, I mean, it's obvious that humans are kind of a weird creature. We don't really belong exactly with the rest of the species here on Earth. We're a little bit different. We seem to have this consciousness and this intelligence that isn't quite the same as other beings. It's just a little weird. And there's also the fact that, for like thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, we walked around on Earth with just, like torches and chisels and rocks and stuff like that. Then suddenly we just started making light bulbs and computers and, cars and trains and all this stuff, like all within the last like 100 years. Like that's pretty crazy. And like now I'm on a computer talking to like people in other countries, and everybody, it's really insane if you think about that stuff, like how quick, all this time with nothing like that, then suddenly there's all this technology. Like that's strange. I think it's strange. So yeah, Navy is investigating. If you want to check out this link, I'll post that there too. They are setting up a official Navy, I don't know what it's going to be called, but maybe it says down there in the bottom. There it is. Yeah, and Limal Farofa says, feeling like an alien Playmobil now. And yeah, I mean, we really could be. I mean, what if this whole thing, like, it's just set up here just to, like, they put us in all these weird situations, just to see, like, what will happen or what we'll do. I mean, it's quite possible. All these, like, politics and wars and all this stuff. I mean, if you really think about everything that's going on, it's pretty darn weird. And, like, all the stuff that's happened in my life and just looking how things tend to go, it's all weird. Like, everything's weird. Like, it's cool, but it's just weird. But yeah, I guess that's all I have for the UFO news today, but it's very interesting. And this is getting kind of long, so I'm going to move along to my movie/entertainment reviews, and just got a couple here. The first one I wanted to talk about was Detective Pikachu, and if you haven't seen it yet, it's going to be well, actually, no, I could do this without spoilers, so even if you haven't seen it, don't, because it's not very good. I don't know. I just thought it was like overall pretty boring, and Ryan Reynolds didn't really make me laugh throughout the entire thing. And Ritual, all right, thanks for coming by, and thanks, man. Yeah, you can check it out later if you want. And but anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, so Detective Pikachu, not so great. The lead character is not really interesting. Like he's not very likable. You can't really sympathize with him so much. Pikachu, like I said, Ryan Reynolds, like I was expecting Pikachu to be, Deadpool, because Ryan Reynolds is hilarious in Deadpool, and I knew it wasn't going to be as adult, but I thought he would at least be funny. But there was very, like, I think I laughed maybe like once throughout the entire movie, and the audience really didn't seem to be responding to it very well either. Nobody really laughed that much, and there are a ton of kids there. And usually, when we saw Shazam, it was packed with kids, and they were cracking up for that movie. But I don't know. Not really worth it unless you're like a huge Pokemon fan. Some of the Pokemon look cool, how they're done with the CGI and stuff. Like Mewtwo is pretty cool looking, and I don't know. But other than that, not really much to see there. I just really didn't enjoy it that much. So the other movie that I wanted to mention, and this is pretty funny that I'm talking about this in the same podcast as the Pokemon movie or Detective Pikachu, but is this movie called Terrifier. Now, if you haven't heard about this movie, I'm going to give you a very strong warning here. This movie is not for the even remotely squeamish person, or even the seasoned horror fan. This movie is one of the most brutal horror movies I've ever seen. And there's a couple of times I had to turn it off. Well, I had to watch it in 2 sittings because it was just... There's a couple of scenes that it just really crosses some lines. And I was like, man. And, as a movie, I enjoyed it. It was like, it had a very 80s type horror film vibe to it. And it's about a killer clown, which is like, a lot of people will think of It. But it's not supernatural. It's just it kind of is towards the end. But the movie itself is done well if you're into the genre, these type of, especially if you like older, like Reanimator type horror films, from the 80s, From Beyond, all of those, kind of gory 80s horror films, Castle Freak, that type of stuff. If you're a fan of that stuff, it's a cool movie, but like I said, it is disgusting. Like, I mean, there are some parts where it's just, I couldn't really watch it, like I had to stop it, then turn it off, and I did something else, and then I came back, and then I finished it. And even then, I was like, I kind of looking away and looking back and looking away and looking back. Like, it's rough. Like, and I'm sure if you watch it, there's a scene in there, and most people hint towards it, like in the reviews and stuff. It's not a scene that many people can handle. Like, it's really fucked up. but still, enjoyable film if you're into the genre. But yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Not for the squeamish, and not even for the pretty strong stomached people. Like, I mean, it was rough for me, and I've watched a lot of horror films. But so that's gonna be all for today. Wrap it up on that note. And thanks for you guys for stopping by, Limael Farofa and Ritual 301. And I know it was a last minute live stream again, so not a lot of chatters, but I'm glad to have you guys here who came by. And be sure to always, check out the links that I post here. And if I forget to post something in the description, kindly let me know. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know as well. And suggestions for topics or guests, feel free to send them my way. So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. I'm going to close it out with one more song. This is going to be one final tune off of the G Stomper Tunes LP. And this one is called... Which one do I want to play? I'm going to play it. This is another biking themed one. This one is called I Don't Want to Get Doored. If you don't know what doored is when you're riding your bike down the bike lane, and when somebody opens their car door and you just slam into the door, that's getting doored. So I definitely don't want to get doored, or I didn't want to get doored then, and I still don't want to get doored now. And that's what this song is called, I Don't Want to Get Doored, off of G Stomper Tunes. And here we go. See you guys soon.